Hey, what's up guys? I'm BTC. There's going to be some pretty massive changes on the competitive ladder in Season 6 during both some of the Gamescom's events and a new developer commentary. Blizzard has kind of laid out what their plan is for the next season. So there are definitely going to be some significant changes in Season 6, and thankfully, some of the major problems in Season 5 are finally being addressed. So let's start going through it. Alright, so this first one is huge. Blizzard is going to try to minimize the benefit of one-tricks. So in case you didn't know, this is how it works right now. If you one-trick a particular hero, it means that you only play that one character pretty much all the time. You never switch no matter what. It doesn't matter if your team needs that character or not. It doesn't matter if something else would be better. You stay on that character and you play it all the time. And the reason for this is because the way the algorithm, calculates your SR works, is that if you stay on that one character, you're better off losing the match as that one character than switching and potentially winning as something else. This means that you can actually climb the ladder with a win rate that is less than 50%. So that just sounds dumb, right? Like you win less than half your matches, and yet somehow you're climbing the ladder. And basically that's how this one-trick thing works. Now Blizzard did try to downplay it a little bit. It's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But when you see players that are climbing up to Master and Grandmaster with a win rate of 40% or less, then something is definitely wrong with that system. So they didn't tell us exactly what they're going to do, but there might be some sort of cap on how much SR you can actually benefit from by one-tricking. So the next thing, which is really big, and this wasn't specifically noted for Season 6, this was something for possible future seasons, is the idea of role selection, or having a preferred role. Now, a lot of people have requested this, but all those systems have been flawed. You cannot allow the player to simply choose what role they want, because if you let the player choose, then they will abuse, or something like that. Anyways, the idea is there's going to be a lot more DPS players than there are going to be support or tank players. So what you're going to have is people are going to queue up for the support role, for the healer role, in order to get a reduced queue time, and then once they're in the game, they're just going to play DPS anyways. And I've heard other suggestions like, well, why don't you just let them queue for 2 roles? Okay, so what you're going to have is they're going to queue for healer and for tank, and then they're still going to play DPS. They're going to queue for whatever gives them the lowest queue time, but then they're going to play whatever the hell they want to play once they're in the game. So I came up with a system. I'm going to put a link down below, and there should be a little clickable thing up on the screen as well. I came up with a role prefer system that is 100% foolproof. It cannot be abused by the player, and it allows for significantly better matchmaking where you have a much more balanced group of players on each team. So Blizzard has said that they're going to do what seems to be a very kind of lightweight, watered-down version of what I suggested. Now, I don't necessarily mean that they took it from me, it's just it has a similar methodology. So the idea is they're not going to let players choose what role you have in the game. Instead, it's going to have some kind of back-end stuff where it's going to go off of what you play the most. So if you happen to play support most of the time, it's going to try to match you into other groups of people that play the other roles most of the time. So that way you're not going to have 4 or 5 Mercy mains on one team. You're not going to have 5 DPS on one team. It's going to try to like say, all right, well, let's grab this guy and this guy who tend to like support, and we're going to grab this guy and this guy who tend to like tank, and then we're going to grab this guy and this guy who tend to like DPS. Now, no one is going to be forced into playing any particular role, but the fact that you tend to play those characters means that it's going to end up giving you a much more balanced team. So again, the system that I proposed is a lot more efficient than what they're going to be doing, but it certainly would require a lot more work on their part. Again, if you want to check that out, link is going to be down below. the seasons will now be 2 months long instead of 3 months. Now, this doesn't really address any competitive problem. It's more about players kind of getting burnt out in a particular season. Blizzard basically found that the majority of players will start and they play for about half the season and then they just kind of stop. Like, the amount of people towards the end of the season is significantly lower than the start of the season. And it kind of makes sense when something is new, when it's fresh, when there's like a new meta or, you know, just any kind of new thing. People want to try it out and play it, and then they get burnt out after a little bit of time. So by making the seasons a little bit shorter, they're trying to kind of reinvigorate people a lot faster and have just more fresh content so people stay involved and continue basically playing the game because that's what Blizzard wants. And moving on, the next thing is that because the seasons are going to be shorter, competitive points are going to be adjusted. You're basically going to get more because the season is shorter. And this also kind of ties into the whole issue of the golden guns. Basically, Blizzard has pretty much admitted that putting the golden guns as a reward for the competitive ladder was a mistake. That people who don't actually have any interest in playing the game competitively are basically forced to play it in order to get the golden gun that they want for their hero that they're then going to use in quick play or the arcade or whatever. So what you end up with is a whole bunch of players that are on the ladder that don't want to be there, and it's generally a miserable experience for them and for their teammates, of course. So it looks like Blizzard is moving towards a system where you can get competitive points a lot faster, and it's going to kind of trivialize getting the golden gun. Like, if you want to get one, it's not going to take a whole lot of effort at all. Honestly, I think what's going to happen is they're probably going to make alternative methods of getting the golden gun, not just through competitive points. They're probably going to have some sort of equivalent with quick play and the arcade so that people can still get it without having to go into the competitive game mode. And that leads us into the next thing, which is, are there going to be new rewards in addition to the golden gun? And the answer to that seems like almost certainly no, because then that would simply make the existing problem even worse. So the next thing is skill decay and the changes that they're going to be making. Now, skill decay was a dumb idea, and it never should have been added to the game. In fact, there was only one reason why skill decay is even in the game, and that's because Blizzard changed the way that the top 500 rewards work. What used to happen before is anybody that got into the top 500 at any point during the season would then get the top 500 rewards. They changed it so that in order to get the top 500 rewards, you had to actually be in the top 500 at the very end of the season. And the problem with that was some very high-skilled players would have multiple accounts, and they would put those accounts in the top 500 and then just park them there and not do anything with them. So Blizzard introduced this skill decay so that you can't have all these extra accounts basically just taking up space in the top 500. Now, the skill decay, in order to get rid of that problem, makes sense, but for Diamond players, why does skill decay need to be there for Diamond? Why does it need to be there for Master? Even Grandmaster, to a certain extent, there's no reason for Grandmasters to have skill decay. And the main problem with all of this is that even though your SR actually drops down, it can go all the way down to 3,000, when you queue up for a game, your hidden MMR would take over and match you against people that you would have been playing against anyways. So essentially, if you were a top 500 player and you just stopped playing and let your rank decay all the way down to 3,000, when you queue up, you're not going to be playing against Platinums and Diamonds. You're still going to be playing against Grandmasters and top 500. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to skill decay you all the way down there. The only thing that skill decay should be in the game for is to knock people out of top 500. And that's it. Grandmasters, Masters, and Diamond do not need to be affected by skill decay at all. So anyways, that was my little rant. But what they're actually doing, they're not getting rid of it, unfortunately. What they're doing, however, is they're just making it so that you have to play less games in order to prevent the skill decay. And also, when the skill decay happens, it is a little bit less punishing. So they're not getting rid of it, but at least it's a step in the right direction. Alright, so next up is that control maps are now going to be best of 3 instead of best of 5. And this was because a lot of the control maps they were finding ended up taking a lot longer than the other matches. So the standard match for like a 2 capture point or a payload or something, that would be, you know, anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes or so per match. But the control point maps were going up until like, 30 minutes or so. And it was just a very long time to play a match. And then when you lose, it just feels like it's that much more punishing because you had so much more time invested in that one match. And then you end up lose and, all that time is gone. You could have played 2 matches of something else in that time frame. So by cutting it down to best of 3, it should be more in line with all the other ones, and the matches should be about 15 minutes. Moving on, the next issue, will there be an MMR reset? And we were given pretty much a definitive no. Now, Blizzard has said things in the past, like, we are never going to add deathmatch to Overwatch, and then they changed their mind anyways. So the fact that they said a hard no to MMR reset doesn't necessarily mean that it will never happen, but it's probably not going to happen anytime in the near future. Now, speaking of MMR, the next thing is the placement matches are now supposed to be more accurate. So this is one of the things that's been happening for the last couple seasons, and it was insanely stupid, and it was really frustrating. A lot of people didn't even know that it was happening. Basically, you would do your placement matches. It would say, okay, you should be about 3,000, right? But instead of actually putting you at 3,000, it would deduct several hundred points from you. So it would drop you all the way down to like 2,700 or somewhere in that range. And the reason for this was that Blizzard had the incredibly misguided and foolish belief that people actually enjoyed being placed lower than what they should have been because the climb back up to where they should be was somehow enjoyable. And if that makes absolutely no sense to you, then don't worry, it's because it doesn't. Rather than placing people where they should be placed and then allowing them to actually progress further, what Blizzard was doing was they were basically making the almost Sisyphean task where you would do your best in one season to rank up as high as you possibly could, and then in your next season, Blizzard would kick you down and make you roll that stupid boulder back up the hill again. Well, what they're doing, thank God, for this season, is they're not doing that dumb stuff anymore. They're not dropping you several hundred points. They're going to try to place you where you should be placed. And where you should be placed is almost certainly going to be roughly where you left off in the last season. And last thing are the changes to the reporting system. I honestly haven't seen any differences whatsoever. There are still a massive amount of leavers. There's still a massive amount of people who are just straight up throwing the matches. And the problem is Blizzard is using an automated system to deal with this. And an automated system is simply not going to be able to tell the difference between someone who is simply playing badly versus someone who is losing on purpose. The only way that you're going to be able to determine that is with a human review. So funny enough, Blizzard needs their own version of Overwatch. In CSGO, they have a system called Overwatch that allows players to review and then kind of vote on whether or not someone was cheating or throwing or just griefing or whatever like that. So what do you guys think about all this? Let me know down in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to check out the Discord server, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the new content. Thanks for watching. Remember, always blame the controller because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.